welcome to our very special and final episode of Season 1 GDF Diaries. I'm here joined by the phenomenal Suzanne Jacob. I can't believe that I bagged the CEO of Save Lives to join us on our show today. I just want to say thank you so much because it is quite a big deal for us. We're not really big, should I say, per se, so I really do appreciate your time. I know you've got a busy schedule. So yeah, we appreciate your time. Would you like to introduce yourself to I know you, but my audience, our audience, and just tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do outside work? What are you like? Who is the real Suzanne Jacob, basically?
The real Suzanne Jacob. So Jackie, thanks for having me. I'm really, really glad to be here. And I hope I can live up to the hype.
I mean, no pressure.
So my name's Suzanne Jacob. I'm Chief Exec of Save Lives. I've been Chief Exec for just under 4 years now, and I've been at the organisation for about 6.5 years. Before that, I was working mostly in national security. Okay. And one of my most fun times doing that was working on the 2012 Olympics, which was pretty amazing. Family-wise, my dad was Iraqi British. He came to this country in the 1950s with his 10 siblings.
Oh, big family.
Big family. So I've got dozens and dozens of cousins all over the country. So seeing them takes up a bit of my time outside of work. Mm-hmm. And also just, kind of trying to hang out and kind of keep calm. Mm-hmm. Work can sometimes be quite stressful. So life outside of work, I try and keep it quite calm.
Oh, I can imagine. Wow. You know what? I wouldn't known that. I don't know. That you worked within the national security. That's really sick. Like, a sick job. Might need you in the future now. Okay, so would you be able to tell me what made you want to work within this sector? Because obviously national security is kind of different from this sector that you're working in now. So what made you want to go into this sector?
So always, like, my whole life I've been a feminist, and I know people have different versions of what they think a feminist is, but for me it's just about like making sure that girls and women have equal chances and have like the best lives they can possibly have. Mm-hmm. And so I'd always been doing bits of stuff around that, like outside of work.
Just kind of being your passion.
And being like a huge passion for me, like the whole time. My mum is like my absolute idol, mm-hmm. and she really taught me that women should be able to do whatever they want to do. Mm-hmm. So when I'd finished working on the Olympics, I knew that I really wanted to do something totally different. I hadn't planned to be, in the civil service forever. And I met this incredible woman called Diana Barron, who was the founder of Save Lives. Yeah. And we didn't end up working together at the time, but she said, what do you want to do? And I said, I just want to help women somehow, like really incoherent, didn't really kind of have a great, strategic plan or anything to sell to her. But she was advertising a job a couple of years after that, and I thought, that is the job I want. That's the job I want.
Oh, that's amazing. And okay, so going into because at the moment you're CEO, I'm sure you didn't step into the CEO role just like that, or did you?
No, I came in as a director.
I'm just going to check. Okay, so you started director. So how did that develop into you becoming the CEO of Save Lives at the moment?
So what I found when I got to Save Lives was I just felt really at home in the organisation. I felt like it was a very practical organisation. We're not really thinking about the big ideologies and concepts and stuff. We're just like rolling up our sleeves, getting on with the work. That's the kind of organisation I really like. So I felt really at home straight away. Really like the people. There's so much talent in the organisation and in the sector as a whole. And so over time I just started to learn more about it, kind of really understand the subject, got to know other people in the sector, and thought, I know I want to stay here for a while, so what's that going to look like in terms of development? I became Deputy Chief Exec, and then Diana, who, as I say, was the founder, said that she was going to be stepping down, and I really wrestled with the idea of whether I should go for the job or not.
Why, if you don't mind me asking?
I always thought of myself as somebody who would support the person in charge, rather than being the person in charge. And so I found it really hard to kind of picture myself as the person who was running the organisation. It felt pretty scary to think of that. But, this sounds like a bit of a cliche in some ways, I guess, for our sector. But honestly, the women that I have met, the survivors that I've met since I've been doing this job, make me feel like I shouldn't ever be afraid of anything, because they are so incredible in terms of what they have lived through, in terms of what they do now. So many of them are now activists. So I don't think I have a right to be frightened of things. So I thought, if I want to do this, if I think I could do this, I've got to go for it.
Yeah,
so I did.
That's amazing. Oh, that's sick. I want to be like you one day. Watch me, guys. Okay, so what does a day, I'm pretty sure your days are different all the time, but let's say it's a normal, okay, today was Monday. What does your day look like? How did you start your day? What's a normal day in the life of a CEO?
Today was a disaster.
Okay, noted. Sorry.
It's not now. Now it's amazing to be here having this conversation, but it started really badly because I was supposed to change over the internet box, and I don't know anything about Ethernet cables and all of this kind of stuff. Okay. So it started with me just like running around with these cables going, I'm supposed to be in a meeting. So it's really late to start my first meeting, and thought, okay, the whole day is going to go badly, but actually things were okay from there. So quick call in with some of our directors this morning. We were talking about the redevelopment of our website, which is going to take a few months. It's a really big job. We've got like these thousands of pages of content. We need to get that down into something that's much more accessible for people. And we want to make some changes in terms of representation and accessibility and a whole load of things. So that's where I started. I then had to join a funder call, development of a pitch that we're going to be making to a funder in a few weeks' time. Think about like, how do we present ourselves as an organisation? What kind of story are we trying to tell about the work we want to do in the future, particularly with young people, which is a really big part of what we're doing at the moment. Then I did an interview with a woman who's writing a book about Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cornwall.
Oh wow! Okay.
So as you say,
the very different. Like just that way. Like, how do you keep up? Because do you have a personal assistant? Because this is just your brain.
I do have a PA. Unfortunately, she's not very well today. But she looks after a number of us in the organisation. She is amazing.
Yeah, because that's a lot to kind of have to, not having to remember, because I'm sure you've got like pop-ups on your diary or whatever, but it's still a lot to kind of carry.
I think the big thing is trying to go into each of those things fully, not like turn up at things underprepared or, not really sure kind of what I'm doing there. I like to go into things having given it a bit of thought. And that's the challenge, like trying to fit in around all of that stuff, all the pre-reading and making sure that I've really thought about things.
And you really understand what the conversation is going to be about when you go in there. That makes sense. Okay. Well, you don't feel sorry for you because you didn't come in here with knowing what we're going to talk about. So kudos to you. Okay, so I'm going to kind of change the conversation now. I'm going to ask you a few questions in terms of the sector that we both work in. Obviously, I'm an IDVA. Children and young people's IDVA. Started my training last week, just saying. It was really good. So what is your view on racism within our sector? So there's the violence against girls and women and girls. What is your view in it? Because obviously there was a lot going on before, and this question I actually asked Mina in our last interview as well. And when it comes out, you'll be able to see her answer. But what is your views in it? How do you feel about it? So I think there's a lot of history in the sector that still, even though I'm 6.5 years in, I'm not as familiar with, like the history of the women's movement and the history of feminism in this country. And I think some of the things that are still a problem inside our sector have been there for a long time. They've been building and not been fixed for a long time. So speaking for my organisation, which is, probably kind of the best place I can start, I think that we were held to account, and I say I, like as the senior leaders of the organisation, were held to account by our team last summer, saying, after the murder of George Floyd, after a whole surge in Black Lives Matter activism, what are we doing as an organisation, not just not to be racist, because we all looked around and went, but we're not racist, and people were like, that's not what we're saying. What are we doing to be actively anti-racist? How are we living and breathing this in every single bit of our work, whether it's about how we are as a team, whether it's about what we deliver as an organisation, whether it's about who we claim to represent, where is the structure, the pace, the breadth, the intensity of the work that we need to do. And I've got to be honest about that. At first I was like, taken aback, can imagine.
And definitely, the team would tell you, I was definitely quite defensive about that, thinking, hang on, like I've always, and I could feel it in myself, and I could feel that resistance to like really acknowledging my part in that. What have I not done that I should have been doing up to this point? So that has been a big process over the last year for our organisation, but we have got a long way to go. When we talked about the kind of stock take we were doing at the end of our year, which is in June, how far have we managed to come and
Yeah.
how much more have we got to do, which is a lot. It's really significant. So I hope that every organisation inside our sector, which is a white majority organisation, is doing that same, like, searching of the soul, like really looking, like holding a mirror up to themselves and thinking it's not okay to be passive, and it's of course it's not okay to be doing anything actively harmful, but passivity is also harmful. So what are we actively going to do as an organisation, and what am I going to do as an individual? So I hope I've been kind of living more of that value over the last year, but it's something that I take very seriously, and I also take seriously the fact that my team had to keep pushing it with me. That's, you know, that's not okay. I don't want to be that kind of boss where people are like, we've told you this before, why are you not getting it, you know? So yeah, personal responsibility on my part, certainly a lot of work going on in the organisation, and I think in the sector as a whole, all of us have got to take that personal responsibility and like really up our game, because women of colour have been trying to raise these issues for such a long time, and if we're not hearing that and acting on that, then, you know, we're never going to be living up to our values. So our organisation's value is to end domestic abuse for everyone and for good, and that bit for everyone, we've got to really make that a practical reality for people. So the conversations we've had over the last year have been quite deep ones, but we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, no, 100%. And even just going back to us having a conversation, that's really how I got to know you better. I really respected that you wanted to have those conversations, because like you said, those conversations are quite difficult and sometimes quite awkward to have, but those are the conversations that might possibly lead to actual change. And yeah, I think that's why I really put you, and I don't want to put you under pressure, but I really put you on a pedestal, because often people don't want to do that because it is a kind of an unknown territory. You don't really know how people are going to react, how some people feel, because everyone's different. You get what I mean? I might be sitting here and saying I really respect it, but some people might feel like still don't think they're doing enough. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
of course.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is really good. And obviously, I didn't know you a year ago, but from where I've known you, I can tell that you really want to make a change, and that's really good in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I do, and I take seriously the trust that you're placing in me when you say that, because that's a big deal.
No, and that's what I'm saying. I don't want you to feel like pressure. Do you get what I mean? But yeah,
no, it's responsibility. You know, I do take that really seriously. Believe me when I say this has been such a big part of my thinking over the last year, and that's, I've got to maintain that, and I've got to put that thinking into action. That's the, you know, the important thing. You know, I think my starting point on this was like, but I'm dual heritage, like how, you know, kind of, as I say, that resistance was rising. I have to accept that my experience has not been the same as other people's experience, and also even if I think that there are battles that I've fought, then I've got to keep working at what are the other people around me facing, and what are the barriers in their way, and how am I going to pull those down for other people? Because it's not just about that kind of personal experience I might have had, or, you know, people in the same position as me, but, you know, how all of us going to move forward? How are we going to give those platforms to people who've been underheard, underrepresented, not listened to, and faced all of these barriers for such a long time? So
100%. No, I think you're doing a great job. So in terms of, okay, we're going to talk about obviously coloured women when it comes to reporting to the police, or just the outrage when something happens to a coloured woman in comparison when something happens to a white woman. So for example, the death of Sarah Everard, may she rest in peace. Obviously it was a horrible situation, everything that happened, it was unfair, and the outrage very much understood. However, there's always that discussion that if this was a coloured woman, the outrage wouldn't have been the same. What is your opinion on that in regards to, often we find that coloured women don't really report to police as much, but I can honestly say that I wouldn't feel that encouraged to report, because I don't feel like I would get the same amount of, I don't know, what's the word? I'm gone blank. But yeah, the same amount of support. Yeah, exactly. So what is your opinion on that? Because that's something I genuinely want to change within my own community when it comes to like the Black, the African, Caribbean, even the Asian community, because I genuinely feel like that's how they look at things. You get what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in that, isn't there?
I know, it's a big question, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. But I mean, I think there are different parts of that. So the media reporting, I think, is one part of that, which is the media's always looking, even amongst white women, it's always looking for like this perfect victim, you know, the victim who couldn't possibly have been doing anything differently to kind of save herself. So this idea that, you know, she was just walking home and she had her keys in her hand and she texted a friend and she wasn't wearing provocative clothing. You know, there's always this kind of conversation around it, as if you can't just say this horrible thing happened to a woman, no matter what she was doing, who she was, what her demographic. Like, you should just be able to say this really horrible thing happened to her, and the fault for that lies with the person who caused the harm.
That's it.
So we've got to turn all of that round, so that instead of saying why wasn't she, you know, on a well-lit street, or why didn't she go home sooner, or whatever it is, we say, why was that guy in that place at that time doing that horrible thing to a woman? Why did he feel he could do that? Why was he motivated to do that? And why didn't we stop him? So that's like the media
The
bit of
focus
this.
is on the woman, and
like how could she change her behaviour to make sure that's not possible? But then you're absolutely right. Part of that media perspective is also only uplifting the stories of particular women. And, you know, all of these many stories that we've seen over the last, you know, decades, generations of women who've been harmed, whether it's murder or whether it's coercive control, you know, all of these different things going on for people, that they're only picking, they're like cherry picking certain stories that they want to tell. And that's reflective of what goes on in society as a whole, the things that we've been talking about in terms of who gets support, who gets believed, who gets prioritized, who gets that like perfect victim status. And, you know, structural racism that applies in this country, which we know is a real thing, despite some of the reports and some of the resistance to that as a conversation, we know that's a real thing. That's happening inside reporting cycles, and how people are perceived, and how the media report things, how enforcement action is taken against people, how victim services respond sometimes as well. There might be a kind of lack of confidence about, you know, well, I don't know, you know, what goes on. So I think there's all of that. And then also, if you're from a community that's been underrepresented, not listened to, not heard, not believed, discriminated against, you know, there's been racism perpetrated against your community, for sure there's that barrier to, should I speak out? What's going to happen if I do that? How are people going to judge me? But also, how are people going to judge my community? So, you know, any of us who come from kind of smaller groups, smaller communities, we're protective of those communities, particularly where there's been racism or other forms of discrimination. So how do we kind of safely go through a process to say something is wrong inside or outside of this community without being in conflict with that protective feeling that we have, with that kind of, you know, we want to be careful of how people are perceived, because there is lots of, you know, there's lots of discrimination out there about different groups. You don't want to get somebody into trouble or put them in harm's way, potentially, even if they may have harmed you. So there's all these really, like, you know, conflicting things going on for somebody. And that's even before you get to the point of maybe going into a service or a police station to tell your story. This horrible thing that's happened to you, with all that fear about, is anyone going to listen to me, or, you know, treat me the way I would like to be treated, with dignity and respect and believe me, and then take action. So many barriers in somebody's way, so many barriers. And all of us as organisations who are working in the response to domestic abuse have got to keep pulling down each bit of that, you know, each barrier that's in somebody's way. We've got to work on every single bit of it, whether it's the media, whether it's that structural racism in society, whether it's how the police respond, whether it's how people feel confident about maybe breaking out of that community picture to be able to say something. You know, I was reading something about the Orthodox Jewish community. So my dad was from a Jewish family. They weren't Orthodox, but I was reading something about the Orthodox Jewish community and how there's this code of silence about bad things that go on inside the community, because it's a small community and it's been discriminated against. So people feel very protective. They don't want to say something. And then also, if you wear a shaitel, which is the wig, how are you going to be perceived as you go into a, you know, so all of these things apply. And, you know, if you're a black woman having to go into a police station, that's loaded with so much kind of trauma, like personal trauma, historical trauma. So, I mean, there is so much that we've got to work on in all of that, like so many different parts of that. But I hope that at Safe Lives, we've kind of made that commitment to being alongside everybody to make that change.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be easy, and I don't think it's going to happen overnight.
It's not going to happen overnight, but as long, I feel like, like you said, if everyone takes the responsibility to make that effort to try and make that change, or encourage your clients or whoever you're working with to make them feel comfortable, to let them know that, you know, that people are here for you to support you. I think that's what
100%.
the first step would be, in my opinion anyway. So I 100% agree with you. Well, you kind of answered this next question, so how can we do that as a community? We already spoke about that. Is there anything that you would advise anyone working within the VAWG sector, or even, like, what would you say to me? Because I'm pretty new. I've been working in this for going to 2 years now, but now I'm actually just starting the IDFA role, and obviously that's more intense in a way. Some of the cases I've come across, I'm like, damn. Do you get what I mean? What would your advice be to me?
Wow. So, I mean, I think you're already doing the most incredible work. Like, really, you should be so proud of the work that you're doing, both in that role and also doing, you know, things like this. It's, you know, it's incredible what you're creating. So I probably don't have a lot of advice that can help.
I mean, guys.
I would say keep being kind to yourself. This is a really tough job. It's a really tough sector to be in. You are going to hear so many really hard stories. And sometimes we don't get like a happily ever after in this job as well. We get like the bad side of life. But we know, you know, we've got so much kind of qualitative information, survivor voices that save lives, which say, an IDVA changed my life, completely changed my life, or, you know, specialist worker just came along at the right time and made such a difference to me. So knowing that you can make that huge difference to people, you are making that huge difference, but staying kind to yourself, you know. So when the pandemic first started, people were saying, oh, you know, the fourth emergency service, and I fell into that. I was like, well, the fourth emergency service is domestic abuse workers. And quite rightly, Mina Kamari and others said, you've got to be really careful of not using that terminology, because people who work in the domestic abuse sector are not emergency responders. You know, you've got to turn your phone off when you're supposed to turn your phone off. You've got to keep those boundaries so that you can yourself stay safe and well, because otherwise, you know, you're going to burn out. It's going to be really tough, and you're not going to be able to do that job that you really care about. So it's like, find your community as well, find your solidarity. I think sometimes working in individual services, you know, you're so like pow kind of through the day, and like all the work that you've got to do, but there's like a whole community of amazing specialist workers and women out there who are in this work or around this work, who can offer the most incredible solidarity, so that when you're having the bad day, they can pick you up, and vice versa. And that's what I've really found at Save Lives, is somehow, somewhere, there's always somebody out there doing something really amazing. And like on the really hard days, I'm like, let me find that to just rejuvenate myself a little bit, or kind of calm down at the end of a really hard day, because there will be those hard days. But what you're doing is incredible, so keep doing it.
I appreciate it. And what would you advise anyone going through abuse or has been through abuse? What would your advice be to them that's watching, possibly? I don't know.
So I know we've talked quite a bit in this conversation about the things that are in people's way, like the barriers. But I would still say to somebody, you can talk to someone. It might be a friend, it might be a family member who's like not involved in the abusive situation. It might be a colleague at work, it might be a teacher, you know, it could be, just think of whoever represents kind of safety in your life, and just maybe trust them with a little bit of the conversation. And I would also say to anybody who is that friend or family member, or if you have an instinct that something's wrong for somebody, you're probably right. I always think that, like whenever somebody's had a little bit of an instinct, they've called me up and said, can I just test something with you? They're always right. You know, so to just help somebody open up a conversation could change their entire life. Even if you don't feel qualified, you can then refer them on to a specialist, like Jackie Cabanza. So you don't have to hold it if you're not a specialist, if you're not qualified to do that. But just to open up that conversation, you could totally change things for somebody.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This was an amazing conversation. We have a little thank you present from me and Jojo.
Thank you.
We just want to say thank you for coming on the show. Honestly, this has been an amazing conversation, and I hope that maybe in the future we can have another one. I don't know. If you want me to come anywhere, we'll come rolling. So thank you guys for tuning in to our very last episode of GDF Diaries Season 1. I can't believe this is the last one. We hope that you found it educational. We hope that you enjoyed listening to the different stories and experiences that people have shared with us. And just remember that together we can make a change. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, comment down below and like our video. Thank you. Bye.